There has always been something wrong with me. Rather than repeating what various psychiatrists have told me, a few incidents come to mind that better explain it. The earliest I can think of would be my grandpa's death when I was 8. I never knew my parents. They were dead before I could walk. An older man took me in and wanted me to call him Grandpa. I never cried, I never whined. My first words were 2 years late. Not that I had a disability, I just didn't want to speak. Without being specifically instructed, I wouldn't even eat. Grandpa tried his best, but he wasted his affection on me. I can't recall any of the countless games, toys, trips, and trips. All I remember were the faces around looking like grey blurs, and everything sounding muddy. He died of an aneurysm at the dinner table while thrusting a forkful of spaghetti into my mouth. His head crashed to the table, knocking his plate to the floor, where it shattered into countless porcelain fragments. I waited for him to wake up, shaking his shoulder a few times and pinching his face, but he never stirred. Instead of calling for help, I got off the table, grabbed a broom, and swept away the plate's remnants. For the next 3 weeks, I left his body at the table while going about my usual day. When his body started to smell, I pushed it off the chair and sent it tumbling to the tile floor. To remove the odor, I covered him with a towel and doused the towel with bleach. After that, I simply ate when the hunger pains grew too strong to handle and slept when my body couldn't stay awake any longer. My thoughts never drifted to the corpse in the kitchen, unless I needed to pour new bleach to fight off the stench of rot. A neighbour discovered me a month after Grandpa died. By that time, his flesh was green and rotten, and I had doused his body in every cleaning supply in the cupboard. After that, I was back in the foster system. The next turning point came in high school, where I was first forced to deal with human interaction. I was so quiet that I could count the number of conversations I'd had with classmates on my hand. It's not that I was shy or socially awkward. I simply had no interest in their lives. High schoolers are petty, vapid, and insecure. So when one clique noticed my apathy, they decided it was arrogance. It started with little things, like rumors and gossip. But when it didn't affect me whatsoever, they stole my things or tripped me in the halls. I couldn't have cared less. As long as I wasn't in any danger of death or serious harm, I wouldn't need to engage. Those girls didn't like that. For a month, I avoided them. But finally, 3 of them, including the leader, cornered me in a remote bathroom a few hours after school ended. The big one guarded the door, and the other 2 forced me against the back wall. "We finally caught the rat," the leader chided. I can't recall most faces or names, but it never mattered. "Have anything to say, Leia? Or don't you give a fuck?" her lackey asked, shoving me against the tile wall. "How long is this going to be? I have to study for my history midterm." I ignored the lackey, staring straight at their leader. "So, you're keeping up that attitude, huh? Sorry for taking up your precious time, but it'd be good for us if you could learn some humility." The leader grabbed my collar and pinned me to the wall. "I don't remember doing anything to offend you. I'm not sure what the point of this is." I grabbed her hand and shoved it off me. "Nobody benefits from this. I won't change, and you'll probably regret it later in life. So can we call it off?" Moment I finished my sentence, the leader cocked her arm back and nailed me with a vicious sucker punch to the eye. I collapsed to the ground, holding my face. It was already swelling, and blood dripped down my cheek. It was the first time I'd tasted blood. It was more bitter than I expected. "You look better on the floor." She rubbed her bruised knuckle. "Give a fuck now," her lackey sneered. Disoriented and dazed, it took a minute for the world to stop spinning. I tried to pull myself to my feet, but she nailed me with a foot straight to my stomach. "Stay down. The leader punctuated her command with another kick to my ribs. I felt something crack. They didn't stop. She and her lackey launched into a barrage of kicks and stomps. My body gave out, and I couldn't breathe with my ribs kicked in. Searing pain covered my torso. At first, I could take it, but when kicks came at my head, I realized I should get active rather than grin and bear it. While they continued to kick me, I reached behind myself and slipped my hand into the front pouch of my backpack, grabbing hold of a fountain pen. As she went for a stomp to my back, I lashed out with my free hand and grabbed the leg she had planted on the floor, yanking it toward me. With a squeal, the leader fell to her back. I scrambled up her body before the lackey had time to react, took the fountain pen in hand, and pinned her arms to the ground with my legs. Shit! Her eyes were wide with surprise, giving me the perfect chance. I took the pen, leveled it over her right eye, and jammed it downward, just deep enough to turn it into a gooey mess, but not deep enough to damage her brain. Her shrieks filled the bathroom, stunning both the lackey and the bigger girl. Tears poured from the eye she had left, and she groaned and sobbed in agony. The other two both charged me, but I put the pen to the leader's neck before they could put their hands on me. Move out of the way. I looked up at the big one. She took shaky steps toward the sink, hands guarding her face like I was a wild animal. I grabbed a clump of the leader's hair and backed toward the door, dragging her with me, pen still aimed at her vitals. I reached the door, I dropped her head, stood up, and ran out. After that, time moved in a blur. My memories were like faded film reels. I went to a correctional school. I can't recall any names, faces, or events and encounters. I assume it was mostly uneventful. As an adult, I worked graveyard shifts in places that never demanded I meet another human until I had enough money to attend online schools. I got a degree, freelanced in data security, eventually got a remote job, and lived in perfect solitude in my studio for years. It was tolerable for a time, but something started breaking in my mind. I'd wake up and realized I'd skipped a day. Dishes would be piled in the sink, which I didn't remember making. A heavy fog settled over my mind. I could still work and sustain myself, but something slowly eroded my sense of self. Some days, I'd forget who I was completely, and I would stand in the middle of the apartment in perfect silence and stillness until the pieces clicked back together in my head. I finally noticed the hole inside me. It had always been there, but I was standing over the edge those days. The only thing remaining was my survival instinct, which was stronger than most. I guess that with nothing else, that animalistic side of my brain was much stronger. That's how I knew I wouldn't make it if I didn't fix myself. I was 27, and I'd been on a linguistics kick for a month, mostly dead languages. It was the last week of the month, and I was on a deep dive through Middle Eastern languages. One late night, while sifting through links to dead pages archived long ago, something stood out. The forum began with an image of a stone tablet, with ancient Arabic writing. The original poster had requested a translation of his tablet from a fringe linguistics community. He said he found the tablet buried in the sand on an excavation mission in the Middle East. He felt a strange draw to it, and believed it chose him, so he hid the discovery from his team. After long, heated debates, they settled on its origin as a method for summoning a Djinn. The original poster claimed he was trying the ritual before disappearing from the forum, never to be heard from again. It looked like he was the only one to attempt the ritual. The rest of the forum wasn't willing to follow along, seeing as it required a flesh sacrifice. The characters were all familiar. I leaned in close to my monitor and recited them under my breath. The moment I uttered the last syllable, something like an electric shock shot through my body, stiffening me in my seat. I kicked my chair back and shot up, panting. Some of that energy still crackled in the air. It was the first time in years that something sped up my heart rate. When the tingling in my fingers subsided, I returned to read over the tablet's contents. They mentioned that this djinn could supposedly grant any wish for an appropriate price. Two instincts fought inside me. My survival instinct signaled the obvious. Whatever I'd stumbled across was dangerous, and there was never a point in walking into danger. But something else, something new, begged for change. It was the greatest chance I could take, the biggest possible change I could introduce. I knew the ritual would work. That feeling earlier gave me absolute certainty. The question was whether I really wanted this change or not. That was the issue. I'd never wanted anything before, but a small part of me wanted to want. Maybe the only reason I didn't want to fix myself was that I had a secret fear I couldn't be fixed. Perhaps if I fixed myself, I'd look back and know I'd made the right decision. So I grabbed the sharpest scissors I could find, a pen and paper and a lighter, and scrawled out my wish. Show me what I want. It was a simple request, but the only one I had. I put the scissor up to my earlobe, hand steady as a surgeon, and snipped off a chunk of the flesh. I never had a problem with pain. It was a sensation like any other, but I avoided it out of necessity. The piece of flesh felt warm in my hand, and my neck grew sticky with the steady blood flow from my ear. I took the paper with my request, wrapped the piece of flesh inside, and placed it on the ground. The electric shock hit me once more again, and some indescribable aura radiated from the ritual before me. I flicked on the lighter and watched the flame dance in the room's darkness. The only other light source was the weak glow of my monitors. Some fog cleared in my mind. I felt awake for the first time in years. Crouching to the floor, I lowered the flame to the paper. The moment the flame made contact, the entire sheet and my flesh erupted into a ball of blue flame and dissipated into dust. I waited for anything, a sign of success, but for 10 long seconds, I stood in perfect silence. Then, time stood still. The images on my monitor froze, and my analog clock stopped ticking. I couldn't move a muscle. As I strained against the paralysis, I heard footsteps behind me. Long, even steps clacking against the floor like a tap dancer. A chill approached me, becoming more intense as the footsteps drew closer. My eyes grew drier until my vision was blurry. The frigid air hung over my shoulder. A dominating presence towered over the back of my bed, just out of my vision. Whatever it was, it didn't breathe. It didn't make the slightest noise. I felt something tickle the skin beneath my chin, and long, slender fingers slithered forward until they caressed my head. They were cold enough to make my skin numb. Hello. A soft and deep voice came from behind me. It came out both feminine and masculine, sending reverberations through my head. You're so soft, Leah. Strange, too. It's thrilling just to be near you. It whispered in my ear. I shuddered. The creature withdrew its hand, and its presence vanished. I had control of my body once again. New light emanated from behind me, seemingly near the couch. I turned to find the creature sitting on the couch, one leg over the other with an elbow on its knee. I never had an eye for beauty, but I couldn't help but admire it. It was breathtaking, a towering figure at least 7 feet tall, in a white pantsuit. Every angle of its face was intentional, sharp, elegant, and androgynous. The creature smiled at me lightly, bearing a mouthful of far too many tiny and sharp teeth. It waited for me to reply, staring at me with unblinking yellow eyes. "Are you the Djinn?" I asked, still standing across the room near the monitor. "Come," it gestured, patting the seat on the couch next to it. I'd rather not have, personally. It exuded an aura of uncertainty. It could have been dangerous, affectionate, intrigued, maybe all of them. Somehow, it was apparent I'd be in more danger if I refused than if I obeyed. So I dutifully walked across the room and sat beside it. "Good girl," it said as I settled in. "No fear. How exciting. Guarded and on alert, but I can feel a hint of emotion." I tried to meet its eyes, but when I did, I grew dizzy. Somehow they sucked me in. "I'm the Djinn, of smoke and broken mirrors. It's a pleasure." It stood from the couch and bowed lightly. Every moment was so fluid, completely unnatural. My heart hadn't stopped racing. My body recognized the danger, but my mind couldn't. "Did you get my request?" I asked as it sat on the coffee table directly before me. It laughed and flicked its wrist, my letter appearing in its hand. "I did indeed. And let me say, I've never seen anything like it." It glanced at the paper before tossing it into the air, where it burst into flame again. "I'd love nothing more than to poke around in that head of yours." It placed one long sharp nail against my forehead, drawing a single drop of blood that ran down my nose. I flinched, eliciting another smile from the Djinn. "I always forget how fragile you humans are," it said. The Djinn snapped its fingers, and the wounds on my forehead and ear healed perfectly, though my earlobe hadn't been restored. "Can you grant my request?" "Straight to the point, I see. Not quite as fun, but I can appreciate it." It ran a hand through my hair like I was a child. "Your request in its simplicity is incredibly complicated. What do you want? Most want what they can't have. Everyone wants to feel fulfilled. But what would bring you fulfillment, Leia?" I watched its mouth movements as it spoke, avoiding those hypnotic eyes. "I don't know," I answered. "Well, of course you don't. The question was rhetorical. But I suppose nuance is lost on you. That's part of your charm." It chuckled and stood, pacing the room with a hand on its chin. "I could poke around in your head and adjust some things myself. Would you like that?" Just the concept felt wrong, cheap, a denial of something I couldn't articulate. "No." The Djinn clacked its foot against the floor. "Well, if you want nothing, I might as well give you everything until you find what was missing. The brute force approach, I suppose." It stopped pacing and clapped its hands. The moment they made contact, I was on my feet and in its arms. It held me and led me into a silent waltz. "What do you think, Leia? Will you let me make you happy?" It twirled me like I was weightless. "Do you want me to give you the world? It would be easy for me. What do you say?" I was getting dizzy. The Djinn stopped, and I was back on the couch with a glass of water. It stood over me, so tall that I had to crane my neck backward to make eye contact. "Will I find what I want?" I asked. "Perhaps. I can promise that I'll do my best in the search." It grinned and held my hand. "What do you want from me?" This was the critical part. I couldn't get a read on the Djinn, though I'd never been good at that in the first place. "Well, how about this? You can live out your mortal lifespan and enjoy yourself. And then, once it's over, you can come with me." "Come with you?" "Yes. I've always wanted a pet. I promise I'll take great care of you. I'll feed you properly, take you on walks, all the things humans like." It squeezed my hand and pulled me to my feet. When I stood, it had transported me to some kind of office. It was immaculate, with towering bookshelves, jars filled with specimens I couldn't recognize, and various artwork from all ages. In the center was a desk with a contract, quill, and ink.
All you have to do is sign right there. I will give you a dream and make it come true.
I walked up to the desk and took hold of the quill. The proposition was simple, and it didn't bother me too much. The price of living as a pet meant I would be alive and unharmed. That's all that mattered. As for finding what I want, if anything could make it happen, it would be the Djinn. I had nothing to lose. Something built up inside me. I couldn't call it a fire. It was more like a spark. It was potential, the seed of hope. The feeling was strange, foreign, almost uncomfortable, but I couldn't let it get away. I took the quill and put it to the parchment, signing my name. A blue fireball consumed the paper and the Djinn clapped. Its cold, white arm snaked under mine and lifted me off the floor, twirling me in the air like a doll.
You made the right choice, Leia. I will make you the happiest girl in the world.
It set me on the ground, and the office disappeared. The two of us stood in an infinite white void.
Now.
The Djinn grinned wider than should have been possible, the tips of its mouth nearly reaching its ears.
Let us get started.
It raised its hands to the sky, and an explosion of color lit up the void, followed by complete darkness. When the material world returned, I was sitting in a chair at the head of a table. 4 other people sat with me, frozen in time. The Djinn walked around the table, inspecting each of them.
Yes, these will do.
The Djinn circled back to me.
Have you heard that many can find fulfillment in family?
It waved its hand at the people around the table.
Yes. Good. We'll test that. Your family members are surrounding you.
The Djinn pointed at them one by one.
Darren, Carly, Jake, your children. And Paul, your husband.
They looked like the families plastered on photo frames on display. Their smiles were radiant, the children were adorable, and the husband looked strong and dependable. Our house was nice but not too lavish, minimalistic and monotone. It all came together to feel pointless. I don't want a family. Who are these people? Are they even real?
Firstly, you don't know that, little Miss Orphan. Secondly, there is no answer to that question, but it is more accurate than not to say yes. They are real.
It pulled a glowing rod from thin air and shoved it down my ear canal, immobilizing my head when I squirmed.
Here are the memories you'll need.
A tidal wave of information bombarded my brain, and I nearly blacked out on the spot.
I'll be back in a few years. Try to enjoy yourself and live life to the fullest. Bask in the warmth of the unconditional love you have never understood.
It held my shoulder and leaned down until its face was inches from mine.
Goodbye, Leia. I sincerely wish you the best.
I couldn't avoid looking into those vacuous eyes. I felt my soul drawn from my body. The Djinn winked and vanished, leaving me with 4 new family members. Without warning or ceremony, time resumed.
Leia, Carly has something to tell you.
My new husband Paul said, with a smile, gesturing to the girl to say her piece.
Mummy, I got first place in the art contest. Look.
She pulled out from under her chair a mediocre drawing of a dog with an off-putting, bright colour palette, a little ribbon with one affixed to the top. It was probably impressive for someone her age, but the composition wasn't my taste.
Interesting,
I lied, taking a bite of the dinner Paul, the stay-at-home dad, had made. Alfredo with a hefty amount of pepper.
Thanks,
Carly beamed. The table went quiet for a moment. While the situation was uncomfortable, I grew curious about myself and the surrounding people.
What am I to you?
I asked the table, setting down my fork and putting my hands in my lap.
What do you mean?
Paul asked, chuckling nervously.
You.
I pointed at the child closest to me, Darren. He was the eldest, probably around 7.
Go first,
I demanded flatly.
Mummy?
The question might have been above him.
What do you think of me? I love you, Mummy. Why?
I asked. Paul cocked his head, mouthing something like, "What are you doing?" to me. I ignored him. Darren fidgeted.
You help me, and are nice.
Even the memories the Djinn gave me indicated nothing like that. I was still myself in this reality, but for whatever reason, I'd built a family.
Fine.
I pointed at Carly, who looked about a year younger.
What about you?
She played with her fork, scratching it against the plate in a way that made me want to take it away from her.
I love you, Mummy, because you're Mummy,
she said with her mouth full. It was a useless answer, but at the same time, it stirred something in me, fanning the flames of my curiosity.
Jake.
I pointed at the youngest child, likely 4 years old or so.
Mummy is good, and you love us.
He giggled and dropped his fork to the floor.
Leia, what's this all about?
Paul asked, bending over to help Jake.
What about you, Paul? What do you think of me?
He stared at me for a bit before answering.
You're my wife, the mother of my children. Of course, I love you. What have I done to earn it?
I asked, leaning forward as if to challenge him.
You provide for us, you care for us. I don't know. We all adore you and need you as part of the family.
I see. I stood up from my table with my plate, taking another long look at the little faces stained with cream sauce and my puzzled husband I'd met for the first time.
Let's see where this goes.
I walked to the kitchen, dumped my plate in the sink, and retired early. It was the first night in my shared bedroom in my white picket fence house with my tailor-made family. It was a learning process, to be sure. When Darren tripped and scraped his knee, I was supposed to make a fuss. When Carly got sick, I was supposed to dote on her. When Paul felt lonely, I was supposed to show him some kind of affection. Paul had plastered the fridge with around a dozen of Carly's family portraits, some of which became relatively impressive. I found myself admiring them sometimes, but, like with all things, cracks began to show. The first instance was when I killed the neighbor's dog. I'll preference it by saying I didn't kill the dog for pleasure. It was completely necessary. As time went on in the family, I was exposed to constant outpourings of love and neediness. I had to react. Little moments drilled tiny holes in my identity, and I found things resembling emotions, but not quite as advanced. Some things felt actively unpleasant. The first of which would be the neighbor's dog. That thing would yelp, whine, howl, and bark all night. I wasn't about to march over and slit its throat. There would be plenty of consequences for that. But one day, the opportunity to free myself came on a silver platter. Carly was making chalk murals on the sidewalk while I read in the yard when that dog appeared, squeezing itself through a gap in the neighbor's fence. As soon as it saw Carly, it charged, but I knew it wasn't about to bite her. When it was near Carly, I sprinted to intercept it and soccer kicked it in the head before it could reach her. The dog staggered, and a new impulse awakened within it, and me. It went to bite me, but it was still disoriented from my kick. I tackled it to the ground and put it in a chokehold. It thrashed and growled while Carly cried behind me. The neighbors emerged from their house to stop me, but by the time their screams reached me, I'd already wrung the life out of it. Even after logical explanations, the neighbors weren't fond of me. Of course, they couldn't do anything, and I built myself a reputation. But I slept well that night. I waited for my family to look at me in disgust, to treat me like a monster, but they never did. My children still craved my attention, my husband and my affection. It was disappointing, maybe. Something about that genuinely unconditional love felt wrong. Every relationship should have conditions. Humans operate on give and take. No matter how hard I looked, that kind of love felt unearned. It made me feel like I owed something I couldn't provide. So, I tested it, starting small. One day, Darren and I were alone at the house. He had this stuffed bear he'd carry everywhere. It was matted and crusty, with years of saliva and spilled meals seeping into the fur. I called Darren into the living room. He stood in front of me with that bear in his arms. I yanked it from his hands and held it slightly out of his reach.
Mum, why did you take Benny?
He tried jumping to grab the bear, but I held it too high.
Am I in trouble?
He asked, backing up and pouting a bit. I didn't answer, instead staring him down. I fixated on his big blue eyes. They'd started to water. I grabbed an arm of the bear and pulled until the stitching ripped. I tossed the arm at Darren. It bounced off his head and fell to the floor, spilling stuffing. Darren took a while to react. He stayed in stunned silence.
But why?
He asked before bursting into tears. I tore off the rest of the bear's limbs and tossed them on the floor while he wailed.
I'm sorry.
Darren apologized for nothing. I tore off the head and threw it into the fireplace behind me, watching the fire rapidly consume the rest of the toy. I climbed the stairs to my room, leaving Darren holding his knees in a tiny ball, face soaked in tears and snot. I turned back to look at him before stepping out of sight. Somehow, a tiny twinge inside me made me need to look away faster than I had planned. Later, I told Paul that Darren destroyed the toy himself as a reaction to a punishment, and he believed it. Darren wouldn't leave his room for a day or talk to me for a week, but he seemed to have moved on by the time he came back around. He was back to asking me to play or read to him. Finally, over a year had passed since I entered that world. My family was celebrating my birthday. The kids and Paul had secretly bought a cake. It sat on the table in front of me, complete with 28 candles.
Make a wish,
Paul said with a smile. I watched the flames dance below me. The inscription on the cake read, "Happy birthday, Leia. Here's to many more." I read it over a dozen times. The others waited for me to do something, but the flames entranced me. After a long silence, I sighed and leaned back.
Djinn, I think I'm done.
I told the empty space beside me.
What do you...
Paul started, but time froze before he finished. I felt a chill in the room and two long, thin hands over my shoulders.
It has been a while. Did you miss me?
I turned to face the Djinn, who towered over me with a broad smile and eyes glowing much brighter than usual.
I'm done. Let's do something else.
I rubbed my eyes. How did I get so tired?
So, the domestic life wasn't to your taste? A shame. What have you learned?
The Djinn took my hand and pulled me to my feet.
I don't know. I feel different, but I don't know if it's for the better.
Well, we have all the time in the world, Leia. Without further ado...
The Djinn pointed its long index finger at Carly, and time resumed just for her.
Pop.
The moment the words left its lips, her head expanded like a balloon, swelling to at least double the size. Her little arms grabbed the sides of her head like she was trying to push herself back together. Her eyes bulged, and her skull expanded until it hit a critical point. Then it burst. Fragments of bone embedded themselves in the walls, and blood painted the room like a piece of modern art, save for where we stood. My stomach felt strange. I tried to look away, but the Djinn grabbed my chin and forced me to look forward. It pointed at Darren and Jake with its middle and index fingers and hissed out mischievous laughter.
Crackle.
The boys burst into flames, screaming and throwing themselves to the floor. All the rolling didn't slow the burn. Soon, their clothes were ash and their skin was charcoal.
You don't have to...
I started to say to the Djinn, but when I saw the glint in its eyes, I knew there was no point.
Crunch.
The Djinn spoke brightly, pointing its finger at my husband. Paul's face crushed down into his neck, like he was under a hydraulic press. The invisible force buried his head into his torso, then folded him like an accordion until he turned into paste on the floor. The Djinn admired its handiwork before picking me up under my arms and raising me to its face. I'd gone pale. I wanted those corpses out of sight. I wanted the last year's worth of memories out of my head.
Very interesting. Well, Leia, are you ready for round 2?
I didn't like that, I said. My voice now carried an unfamiliar waver.
That's good. Knowing what you don't like will make it much easier to find what you do.
The Djinn set me on the ground and raised its arms over its head like before. The world folded itself countless times until the Djinn could pluck with one hand. It tucked the compacted world into its pocket, patted it once, and turned on its heel. It stretched a hand out, offering it to me.
Shall we?
I placed my hand in the Djinn's, feeling its long, spindly fingers close around mine. A door rose through the bottom of the void. It was a solid, thick wood, maybe oak, with an ornate, disturbing knocker, a carved face distorted in agony. The Djinn grabbed hold of the candle, turned it, and pushed the door open, gently guiding me with him. Through the door, I saw a crude gathering place in a vast desert. We stood on a podium, and thousands of people stood frozen below. Their eyes were sunken, and their bodies were rail-thin. They wore loose, tattered cloth over their tanned flesh.
What is this?
I asked, scanning my surroundings.
This
The Djinn made a sweeping gesture around the room.
is perhaps your purpose.
What do you mean?
I knew it loved to be cryptic and theatrical, but I couldn't fathom its intentions.
Take a look.
The Djinn said, pointing to the crowd.
Contentment is purpose, my dear Leia. One may ask, what is the purpose?
It leaned against the podium, running its hand over the dry wood.
In my long, long life, 2 archetypes stood out to me. Those who find purpose in giving, and those who find purpose in having.
The Djinn gestured for me to meet at the podium. When I drew close enough, it scooped me up and placed me in its lap.
You do not find purpose in having, so let us try option 1.
The Djinn reached behind its back and pulled out a basket full of bread and dried fish.
I once knew a man who took great pleasure in doing this.
He handed me the basket and placed me before the crowd.
These poor, hungry souls, you could ease their pain. Or
The Djinn materialized a short bronze sword and handed it to me.
if they deserve it, you could dole out punishment. Bear in mind that they and this world are entirely real.
The details were simple, but the idea was convoluted. I held the sword to the sky, the sun overhead glinting off the blade.
Okay,
I said.
Perfect. Call me when you need me, and as always, I wish you the best, Leia.
It disappeared before I could blink. Time resumed the moment the Djinn vanished. The crowd surged toward the stage, clamoring for attention, begging for any morsel. A part of me felt what I assumed was disgust. A small girl slipped to the front and stretched out a malnourished hand. Her eyes were dead and piercing. I felt uncomfortable. Grabbing a loaf and a fish, I handed them to the girl. In return, she gave me a small smile.
Thank you.
I could barely make out over the crowd's roar. I searched myself for how it affected me. Satisfaction? No. It reminded me of the emptiness inside me. Knowing that I couldn't feel what I should was just another burden. I tossed more loaves to the crowd, causing them to erupt into cheers. The loaves and fish never seemed to run out. Some thanked me, others wept, but most simply bit into their share and scurried off without a word. Around 1/3 of the crowd had been fed, and those unfed grew restless. One man surged through the masses and climbed onto the stage. He locked eyes with me, then the basket, before charging me. A hit of adrenaline hit me, and I withdrew the sword. When the tip pointed toward him, he clutched his chest and collapsed to the floor, dead before making contact. My face flushed, and my heart beat slightly faster. There I was, master over their lives and deaths, wielding the powers of God. But it didn't touch the hole inside me. It scratched an inch, but faded like a smothered candle. The crowd fell to their knees.
Forgive us, Lord. Messiah. Forever grateful.
Their words rung in my ears. The basket in my hand felt heavy, and their words only added to the weight. To test myself, I pointed the sword at the man in the back who remained standing. His body went dry, skin shriveling, and eyes turning to dust. Parts of him drifted away, and when he fell to the sand, his body dissolved into the grains. It felt distasteful, pointless, and wasteful. The crowd cheered once again. I suppose that was the god they desired. I couldn't carry the weight of the sword and basket anymore, so I tossed them into the crowd. The moment they left my hands, I felt the weight leave me. Relief washed over me, along with a feeling of lightness. They tore each other apart to reach my discarded items, biting, clawing, anything to have them.
Djinn, I'm done.
I sat on the podium and watched the carnage unfold below me. The door appeared behind me and the Djinn stepped through.
Are you going to kill them like last time?
I asked the Djinn, overlooking the chaos in the crowd.
Would you like that?
It asked, pulling me to my feet.
Probably not.
The Djinn led me out the door and back into the void. The sounds of violence ceased as the door shut behind me.
I love to hear your thoughts, Leia,
the Djinn said as the door slid back into the floor.
Hurting people makes me tired. Helping them makes me feel empty.
I see. I have an idea.
The Djinn waved its hand and the white void went black. I was perfectly alone in the darkness, consumed. Then, countless stars blinked into being all around me. Planets formed in the distance, and the lights of galaxies bloomed and drifted through space. I looked down at my body and found it completely missing. My arms and legs wouldn't move, and I couldn't even blink. I willed my consciousness forward and drifted off at the speed of light, watching stars flash by in a blur. I stopped to see the planet's surfaces or bask in the stars' light. It was, I can't describe it, freedom. I could influence nothing. I may as well not have existed, and it was the first time I couldn't recognize that hole inside me. I don't know how long I wandered, but finally heard a voice.
Do you remember me?
It asked in that smooth, inhuman, commanding voice. The stars blinked out of existence. Then the planets, galaxies, and nebulas, until everything was black. Like the Djinn had flipped a light switch, everything went white, and I was back in my body.
Hello, Leia. It's been a while. How do you feel?
It asked.
It was better. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have to do something that I couldn't. Simple, light.
I was still somewhat disoriented. I lay on the ground looking up at the Djinn standing far over me.
What you want is certainly simple. What you want is to want nothing. You don't like knowing what you should feel that you can't. You don't like to choose. You like to appreciate from an unfathomable distance, but leave no trace.
The Djinn snapped, and we were back in its office.
You might be right, but I can't live like that. Everyone has to choose. We're all forced to have that freedom.
There may be a solution that will satisfy both of us.
The Djinn rummaged through a door on its desk and took out what looked like a steel choker. It tossed it on the desk in front of me.
I can take away your freedom to choose. You will follow me until time snuffs out the last star and beyond. You will jump when I say jump, grovel when I say grovel. You will watch as I make and destroy countless realities. I will be by your side forever.
I picked up the collar and inspected it. It was warm and smooth, and the metal had a rainbow sheen.
Will I be happy?
I asked. It would be nice. I would live forever. I would see everything there was to see. I would never again have to confront that broken, empty part of me.
It's possible.
Why are you so interested in me?
I asked the Djinn. It stood from the desk and placed a hand on my head.
You're unique. I've seen many things and met many people, but few come with desires like yours. You don't feel quite human, which is perfect, as I was starting to get sick of them. Come with me.
The choker felt light in my hand, comfortable. I didn't know what it would make me do, what I would have to witness, but it understood me. It presented a way out of life on the verge of collapse. I would have given purpose until the end of time, one I could never question. I held the choker to the Djinn.
Could you put it on?
I asked.
Certainly.
The Djinn wrapped the choker around my neck and clasped it shut. It laughed lightly.
This will be fun. I'm sure of it.
That mischievous tone returned, and it gave a sly grin. It could have lied. It could have had nightmares in store, but I didn't care, and I would never have to again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to click subscribe and check out some more stories here.